It was early autumn when Elliot Graves arrived in Silent Hollow, a stretch of woodland hidden on the outskirts of a forgotten town. Elliot wasn't a reckless man, but grief has a strange way of changing people. It carves away at you, hollowing you out. He had lost everything: his fiancée, his business, his closest friend. Each betrayal hit like a slow, deliberate knife. And when Elliot heard about Silent Hollow whispered about in hushed tones at dimly lit bars, it felt like a calling, a place to escape, a place to disappear. And so he packed his bags, told no one, and drove off into the gloom. The road wasn't on any map, just a thread of cracked asphalt, swallowed by trees so dense they seemed to lean in closer with every mile. When Elliot reached the clearing, just a patch of dirt surrounded by a wall of evergreens, the silence struck him first. It was unnatural. No birds, no breeze, not a single sound. The silence rang in his ears, but Elliot didn't mind. Peace, he muttered to himself, at last. The first few hours were uneventful. He set up his camp, pitching the tent, lighting a fire. He wandered through the woods aimlessly, letting his thoughts scatter like fallen leaves. And then dusk came. Elliot stood by his fire, sipping lukewarm coffee, when he heard it. His head snapped up. The sound circled him, soft but deliberate, just beyond the edge of the firelight. He squinted into the shadows. "A deer," he whispered. "It's just a deer." But the rustling stopped. Silence. And then a whisper. "Elliot." The hair on his neck stood on end. He spun, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the dark. Nothing. Just trees, shadows. The whisper must have been his imagination. That's what he told himself. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something out there was watching him. He doused the fire, crawled into his tent, and zipped it shut. As he lay there listening to his own heartbeat, a sound broke through the stillness. A faint scratching. At first it was gentle, just outside the tent. Then it moved, slowly, deliberately. Scratching around him, and then something tugged at the zipper. "Who's there?" he shouted, grabbing his flashlight and knife. Silence. Elliot yanked the zipper open and leapt outside, light flooding the darkness. Nothing, but scattered around the tent were footprints, long, dragged, not human. Elliot didn't sleep that night. When the sun finally rose, he made a decision. He would leave. But when he reached the clearing where his car had been parked, his stomach dropped. His car was there, but the windows were shattered, the tires shredded. Circling the vehicle were those same footprints. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. No signal. "You're fine," he whispered. "It's only 15 miles back to town. You'll walk." And so he did. At first, the walk felt like salvation. Sunlight streamed through the trees, warm and golden. "It's over," he told himself. "You imagined it." But the deeper he walked, the less familiar the woods became. The trees seemed wrong. Their trunks twisted unnaturally, the branches curling toward him like claws. Then he saw it. A figure. Far ahead, standing perfectly still. Elliot's heart soared. "Hey," he called. "Help me." But the figure didn't move. As Elliot got closer, he realized it wasn't human. Its limbs were too long, its face smooth and pale like damp clay. And then it smiled. Elliot ran. Branches whipped at his face. The ground blurred beneath him. How long he ran he couldn't say, but when he stopped, gasping for air, the howls began. Low, deep, and close. One by one they joined together, howls of something hungry. Elliot turned and ran again, feet pounding the earth. When he saw the cabin, it was like a lifeline. The cabin was old, rotting, but it had walls, and a door that locked. Elliot slid to the floor, his back against the wood, hands trembling. From the window he saw them. Figures, dozens of them, crawling out from the trees, their smooth faces turned toward him. One of them stepped forward, pressing its face against the glass. Its mouth opened wide, too wide. And it whispered, "Elliot." Elliot doesn't remember much after that. Morning came and the howls were gone. The figures vanished. He staggered out of the cabin, following the sunlight until he found a road. A real road, where he collapsed, waving down a passing truck. When he told the driver about Silent Hollow, the man's face paled. "You're lucky," he said. "Most don't come back. They say that forest takes the lonely ones, turns them into something else." Years later, Elliot rebuilt his life, a new apartment, a new job. But sometimes late at night he hears it again. At the door. And when he checks through the peephole, there's nothing there. But in the morning, on the floor outside, he always finds footprints.